Welcome back to this week's episode of Be Bolder. This week, I am joined by one of my Thompson Hine teammates, Jasmin Hurley, and she will in a second tell you a little bit about herself, but we're going to continue down our train of let it hurt, let it suck, let it go, and moving on to these amazing next steps in our lives. So Jasmin, thank you so much for joining us. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for those who are listening today?
Okay, awesome. Well, first of all, thank you, Lindsay, for asking me to be on your podcast. I really appreciate it. So a little bit about myself, the bullet points, not an Ohio native, grew up in Massachusetts, come from a military family. So it made sense that I then joined the military when I turned 18. I went to West Point, graduated in 2005, served in the Army active duty for 5.5 years, a military police officer. Got to travel the world, got to deploy, had some fun times, decided in 2011 to transition out of the military, worked in a corporate environment for a couple of years. It wasn't really agreeing with me. My employer also agreed with me that it wasn't agreeing with me. And we parted ways. But that really was a catalyst for me to sit down and say, what do I really want to do with my life? And that led me to law school. So I was accepted to law school within months of leaving my job and graduated in 2016. I've been practicing law since then. I've worked at a couple different firms, and I'm here now at Thompson Hine working with Lindsay, and it's amazing and I love it. And so it focused mainly on new venture work, but I've also done a spectrum of things from bankruptcy litigation and creditors' rights work to intellectual property, trademarks, copyrights, to employment settlement negotiations. So I feel like it's I've done a little bit of a lot of things to try to figure out what exactly I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And I think I've firmly landed on where it is I'm supposed to go. When I'm not practicing law, I'm a mom and a wife. I have 2 children, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. My husband is also a veteran of the United States Army. And so we try to give back as much as we can. I work with different organizations, Ohio Women Veterans Foundation, Bunker Labs, various other organizations to try to better the lives of veterans, whether it's just in general or veteran entrepreneurs specifically. So
awesome. Well, let me certainly say this to you and your husband. Thank you for your service, because I recognize that freedom isn't free. And so we appreciate you and everything that you've done for us and our country, because I know that stuff can be really tough. But I think that's where you met your husband, isn't it? Didn't you meet there?
We did, yes. So I may or may not have been his boss. One of those little taboo things that we don't talk about. But I mean, it's one of those little things I look back on. I'm like, if our meeting and being in the same spot at the same time was just, I mean, it had to happen in that way, in that situation, because otherwise we would have never met. So I always look back at the situations that brought me to people, and you know, there's no such thing as a negative situation. I feel like there's always a way to learn, or some good that's come out of maybe some things that were less than comfortable at that time, you know.
No, so. And I think it's such a beautiful way to look at it too, because I think a lot of people forget that, you know, sometimes we have these horrible things that are happening and unfolding before us, and then, or, you know, tough environments or whatever it's going to be. But a lot of times they end up giving us, or opening doors, or giving us these amazing gifts that, you know, but for having those, spoken like a true attorney, but for
I know, right?
But for having those, we wouldn't have that. I mean, and it's wild, right? To your point, yes, maybe I would imagine, you know, serving overseas and being away from family and friends for extended period of time was probably incredibly hard and challenging, and it probably took a toll on you to some degree. And then, you know, you meet someone really special who you start a whole life with. So
yeah,
kind of a blessing, right?
Oh yeah. And I mean, even being, you know, just away and kind of on my own, I knew we all go through chapters. I'll go through chapters of life, and being on my own and being a real adult and being away from my parents and being away from family in general. That's where, I felt like I had a great opportunity to build, we call it the tribe, the friend, the friend group, the friend family group. And I was very, very fortunate to be stationed near people. I was, in a serious relationship with someone else at the time. We happened to just only be two hours away, but I had other friends who were close, and, expanding the friend group that I'm still friends with today, so, it was scary, but it was also, a wonderful opportunity as a young adult. Lots of response. I look at it now, I'm like, man, I was given way too much responsibility and freedom at like 20 something years old. And I'm really, really happy I didn't squander that or get myself into some questionable situations. So kudos to my parents on instilling the fear of retribution.
There's
consequences, right?
Yeah. It's that good old guilt that
right.
I was raised Catholic, so I felt like I was guilty for things I don't even know that happened or didn't happen. Like it was just what happened.
I didn't kill Jesus. Like, why am I upset? Yeah, I went to Catholic school, so I completely understand. Like being a Baptist in a Catholic school, you're like, I just feel very, very guilty about everything.
All the time.
all the time.
Yeah. All the time for things you did not do.
Yeah, you're just like, you did that, but I feel guilty for it. So guess this is how we're doing this.
Yeah, how funny. So speaking of that, when you had to transition from, let's say, military life to job life, or maybe first career life to second career life, did you feel any like struggles or guilt or anything like that associated with any of those changes? And how did you deal with that?
Yeah. And I mean, I still feel some of them sometimes, not so much guilt, but it's more just like, was this the right way to do it? Transitioning out of the military is difficult, so much so that, I have a friend who puts it very succinctly. He says, the military trains you how to be in the military, but it never trains you how to be out of the military. They're just kind of like, goodbye, here you go. You get a week-long class when you have years and years of training put behind what you're doing. And so, there was a struggle to try to figure out what I want to do. Who do I want to be when I grow up? Coupled with, and I think some people go through this. I think I went through it a little bit more because of my upbringing in a pretty strict household. Who am I outside of, a uniform or something that somebody was like, this is who you are. I went from being in, a fairly strict, but, strict, loving household of being like, these are your boundaries.
Right.
To another, to another environment that was like, here are your boundaries. Sure, they were a little bit wider, but I still had boundaries. I was 28 years old, you're newly married, and you're like, I don't even know what I want to do with my life. I don't even know who I am. Like, do I like this? Do I not like this? What kind of TV do I get to watch TV? Where do I hang out with friends? How do I make friends? Because do I make friends at work? What do I even do? And it's just horrendous when you're just also socially awkward like I am, where you're like, I don't know how this works. So, I look back at the couple of years in between 2011, 2013, when I left the military, transitioned out, and was working at my first job. I didn't feel comfortable myself. I felt pretty awkward. I'm sure I was very awkward sauce to everybody. And just like not probably just a very awkward person, because I was just trying to figure things out. I felt like I started honing in on that when I went to law school.
Okay.
Because I felt like I had a little bit more time to just sit and think about things on law school kind of makes you think about things on a grander level, like, where do I fit into this grand profession? Where do I fit in this world? Also turning 30 helps you like, I got to get my stuff together because I'm turning 30.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been married for a couple of years. I'm probably going to have kids soon. You know, that was our plan. So I should probably figure out my stuff before I bring in this tiny person who has zero idea about what's going on, can't even like feed themselves and communicate in the same way that everybody else does. So I think that really helped shape figuring out who I was, figuring out what I wanted to do, in my purpose and path moving forward. I always look back at entering law school as, you know, I felt like there was a fundamental shift in that, where, you know, I had that awkwardness and that confusion. And then I look back at law school and I don't feel like I was that way.
Sure.
I feel like this is the path. This is what you're supposed to be on. And I felt like I knew which way, you know, there was a way forward in moving. You know, you go to law school, you graduate, you could take the bar, or you can, you know, do something else, but at least there was some way forward that I could move, as opposed to before. It was like, well, you could go here, you could do this, you could, you know, continue to work for this company, you could go work for another company. What do you do? Whatever they'll hire you for, you know, it was just way too open. And I felt like I was just wandering.
Sure. So you had to let go some of the structure, and you had to let go some of the, like, okay, then you went into no boundaries. And then I guess kind of brings back some boundaries to some degree, right? You got to get the work done. Or you don't pass. You got to take the bar exam, or you can't be a lawyer, right? So,
well, and I think it's figuring out, okay, what boundaries are, you know, what structure and what boundaries are healthy. You know, the military is a wonderful organization that is set up in the way to get results in certain ways. Not all of it is positive. Not all of the interactions are positive. Not all of the motivating ways to motivate people are positive. Ultimately, they're probably the most negative and abusive ways that you can motivate. So, like, if you did it to your kid, you'd be like, why are you yelling at the person like that? Like,
right.
That's okay. And you know, having acted in a certain manner towards a coworker, and then someone saying like, you can't do that. You can't say that. That's not, and you're like, you're right. Correct. Noted. Noted. So, you know, realizing what's healthy, what is productive, and implementing those things. I always joke to my husband, you know, I feel like I'm more military now than when I was in, because I've figured out how to implement you know, certain things more positively into my life, and how they can work and be advantageous, as opposed to before. I was like, why am I doing this? This doesn't even make any sense. What was the point of this? And now I'm like, oh yeah, trackers are amazing, because I'm a hot mess if I don't have a tracker. If I don't have a checklist, I don't have a tracker, I'm a hot mess. I'm going to forget everything. You know?
Mine's just like a running 65-page notebook.
Yes. I didn't say the tracker wasn't a running 65-page notebook. There's a tracker. It's just like running dates of like,
like, get this done somehow, question mark.
Double check with Lindsay on this one, because
do it.
Question. Yes.
Funny. So, okay, how did you feel law school was for you? I'm always curious about this, because I think a lot of people have a lot of different experiences in law school, good, bad, and different. I mean, it teaches you a mindset, but
yes. Yeah. And well, I mean, I think I figured out the game of law school pretty early, because I'd already been in a similar game. The West Point already uses some of the Socratic method. So I was like, all right, I can't look like an idiot. I'm one of the older, you know, as a non-traditional student entering law school is at 30. You can't look like an idiot. Everyone's like, that old lady's an idiot.
Like, you just take a time out, like being 30 in law school is question mark old. Like, I mean, some of those kids are 21 years old when they enter law school. It's like,
and yeah, it blows my mind. Some of them are like, yeah, I can drink now. And I'm like, I've been drinking.
Decade.
I've been drinking. What are you talking about? But one of the things that led me to the University of Dayton was it was a smaller school, and I saw a wonderful mix of students. So you had your younger students, you had your students who quite obviously came from privileged backgrounds, some students who you knew that they were working their way through, and then older students. The oldest student in my class, I do believe, was 60 something years old.
Wow.
I mean, he graduated from the Air Force Academy the year I was born. So that kind of gives you an idea of how old our oldest student was.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And now he works for Governor DeWine, and it's all good. And I think I see him at least once every couple months when I'm in the building, and I'm just like, hey, we always like, we should get lunch, and then it never happens. But seeing folks like that was helpful to me, because it was like, okay, you're supposed to be here. I didn't feel like it was difficult, because I was like, this is my job, and it was great. It was like, I get to study all the time. Did I study as efficiently? Probably not. I mean, I sort of slacked off after my second year, partly because I had my daughter. I gave birth to my daughter into my second and third years. But also by the time I rolled into my third year, I already had an offer at my first firm. So I was like, graduate.
Yeah.
That's the part. And I was like, survive this first year of your child's life. Those were kind of like my key things, and I slacked off a little bit, but I knew, I generally knew what I wanted to practice. I generally knew where I wanted to practice. And I knew that I wanted to be more involved in giving back to the student body in general, as opposed to like law review. And it all just sounded really miserable. Everybody just sounded super miserable writing a paper. And I was like, this is a crowning achievement of this is kind of academic achievement. And everyone's like, I hate this. I hate everything about my life. And I was like, well, I'm going to go be a TA. I'm going to go, work on the student bar. I'm going to hang out with my family. It was the first time. So me entering law school was the first time that my husband and I also were living in the same house for the first time since we got married. Yeah. So we had been married for 2 years, going on 3 years before we were actually permanently living under the same roof. So I would work. Yeah. So he was stationed down at Fort Campbell. I would work all week. And then on Fridays, I'd have my car loaded up, and I would leave work and drive the 5.5 hours down to Clarksville, Tennessee.
5.5 hours every week?
Every other week.
Every other week.
Yeah. So I joked that I was every other week I'd commute. Then I joked that I was commuting back home, because we had bought a house in Clarksville, Tennessee. So every other week I'd drive down on Friday night. I'd get in about like 10, 11, hang out on Saturday, and then Sunday evening I would drive back home and,
get back in the car
and drive home and go back to my tiny little apartment in Grove City. So I was more focused on, doing well. Sure. But not killing myself.
Right.
I mean, I was like the ultimate slacker. Like, I mean, I was in the top 10 of my class after the first semester.
Oh, wow.
Everybody else then got their stuff together and figured out how to law school. And I was like, sure. I'm okay, cool. But I still got a scholarship for, being a summer associate at my first firm. One of their diverse summer associates. I still worked with them, still went back for the next semester, the next summer, and got a job offer. So for me, I was more concerned about really experiencing what was going on and being productive, but not like killing myself to the point where it wasn't fun. And sure. I didn't want to practice law once I got out of law school because I was so burnt out.
Which was basically me. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, didn't you also do an MBA?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought about that.
Dumb. It was a great move, but also you don't think about how that extra stress and pressure just applies a whole nother level of it makes you just get to a point you're like, I don't care.
Well, I also think you were also in a different environment too, because you were coming up on the recession of '08 and
Oh, I
'09.
was. Yeah.
So it was a different dynamic as opposed to, coming out of law school in 2016, things were starting to, yeah, everyone's like, oh, and now it's just like, you want a job? You want a job? You can pick whatever you want. You want a
You want
job?
to live at home? You want to work at home?
Yeah.
You want you want to
Yeah.
get a Bezos, keep your rock, fly up to Mars, do your thing.
These are the days. Like, what is happening? Wild West out here with run on associates. It's like, do you want to work here? Do you want to work here? And you're like, whoa, no, leave me alone.
So wild. It's so wild. So how did you feel about your first couple of roles, and what would you say are the most significant good and bad things that you learned from those?
Yeah. I think I came into being an associate with some high expectations of both myself and the people around me. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. We as lawyers are very, very good at what we do when it comes to lawyering. We as lawyers are very, very bad as managers. And so I'm always very, very happy when I meet good managers who either just kind of get out of the way and guide, or are the ones who really sit down and give the concerted feedback and actually kind of care. And my husband constantly reminds me, like, hey, you are comparing apples and oranges when you are like leadership in the Army, leadership in the real world, because everyone's trained this, in the military, we're all trained, and most of us still do it badly, on any given day, because we're human beings and we're governed by our emotions 99% of the time. So, the same thing, I've really had to remind myself, everyone's in the same boat.
Sure.
When it comes to being an attorney, being a partner. Not everyone figures it out, because partners are kind of just kind of thrown into it too. You're like, and now you're a partner, and
you have a bunch of people you got to tell what to do.
So it's always encouraging when I see there's like a progression of, okay, here's what we're expected of you when you're at this level as an associate, because, work with we want you to be working with these associates, because then you figure it out. Everyone eventually figures out what their managerial style is, good, bad, indifferent. So that was probably the one thing that struck me, transitioning into becoming an attorney. Also, not everybody knows exactly what they're talking about, and that's okay. And that's okay. And I'm learning to become comfortable with pushing back when I think I'm right. Probably too comfortable, as some people would probably attest to. I'm like, no, what do you mean? I think I'm right in certain situations. So, and I'm happy to do that, because I feel like I'm also advocating for myself and my expertise, and no one really wants that one person who is just like, yeah, that makes sense. If it's wrong, it's wrong. Or if, somebody is not thinking about what's going to hurt if I end up being wrong. I learned something new. If I ask the question and I end up being wrong, the person can be mad with me for 10 minutes and never give me work ever again. But at least now I know the reasoning behind why I was wrong, or I was right. And, we caught the issue for the client moving forward. So yeah, and I guess those are some of the bad things. Some of the great things that I've learned is that, again, everyone's kind of in this together. And so UD, it was very, very good about being like, look, this is a collegial environment. You're only going to meet maybe one or two of those jokers who are just the worst to work with. The town is small, in Dayton, but like the town is small, but any town in Ohio is small. So be careful about what type of image you are putting out there. You can be firm, you can be fair, but don't be a dick, for lack
Sure.
of a better term.
All the time.
Right. When you're going up, everybody knows when you go up against those certain people. And I'm was happy to learn that and to implement that. And I see law school friends who did not, and I'm not going to even say friends, law school classmates who did not get that in their head beforehand.
Uh-huh.
And now, I mean, if they called certain people, they would not be, we would be less inclined to help them out of a jam.
Sure.
Or offer a job to them because they're just so unpleasant to be around.
Sure. Yeah, it's kind of funny. We always forget, like, it is a small world, even if it's, like I think about the venture space too, like venture, although it's nationwide, it's actually not that big of a community when we really think about it. So think about how many times we bumped up against the same firms over and over and over again. And sometimes you see one of them come up and you're like, you do that like viral and you're like, well, this is going to be a thing.
Yeah, this is going to be delightful. And I mean, that's probably the biggest positive lesson I've learned is that it's a long, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so it makes sense to be collegial, to be nice, to cut some people some slack in a way that doesn't put yourself or your client, in a bad spot. But no one's being shot at. No one's being, no one's life is on the line at this moment in time. So there's no reason why we can't slow down and figure it out.
Exactly. I say that all the time. We're in law and finance. No one's dying here today.
No one is. If someone's dying, then
we got bigger issue.
Yeah, there's something wrong here. Like, we should not be handling this. Like, if someone's dying, I'm like, no, I
have had people die, and it's like the stories are like insanity, and then trying to manage through it is also equally insane. But anyway,
that's a whole other podcast. That's a whole other episode.
That's true. That would be on the Patreon.
That's the Patreon.
Without revealing naturally.
Yeah.
Anyway, oh gosh. So I'm curious about this because I know, look, the world can be a tough place sometimes for women in the law. But when we add, you're a diverse woman in the law, you are a veteran, diverse woman in the law. We just kind of keep, adding these unique factors to you, but they can oftentimes, people, I think, wrongly make assumptions about, they think, well, a veteran's going to think this way, or, a female's going to think this way. What are some of the toughest lessons that you've learned so far through, just being unique?
Yeah. So I think sometimes being unique, it does put a spotlight on you. Sometimes it's a good spotlight. I feel like I've had more positive experiences, with my colleagues and clients, because they're like, I want to work with you because I feel like you understand me being a woman, a veteran, a woman of color. There have been some folks who, have said, you have to be that much better. You can't, your hours can't be low. Because then everyone's going to say, okay, you're a mom. Obviously, she's not going to want to work as hard. You're a woman of color. Obviously, she's not going to want to work as hard, which is not true. And so hearing things like that has been frustrating, particularly because they're coming from people who look like me. And you're like, what? Why are you, why are you putting that on me? Again, that's a whole other podcast episode there, but, so that's something that I have to try very, very hard not to allow to become part of the inner mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Of because inevitably I'm going to mess something up. Like I messed 3 things up just in the last three days of, it happens, you fix it, you move on. But I have to make sure that it then I don't internalize it. And it's difficult because, those comments, I've heard those comments more than once my whole life. So it's very, very, I have to work very hard to make sure that it doesn't become part of the internal dialogue and the internal mantra of like, of course you didn't, you're a mom. No one's going to expect you to want to hit these. Of course they know you're going to fail because, you're a woman of color or, so I just have to work very, very hard to make sure that I don't internalize that. And I internalize the positive of, our clients want to work with me because I have a unique background. I bring a perspective to the table for veterans, for women veterans, for, veterans of color who are not in the legal space. As you tick off each of the unique factors, the population decreases exponentially, to the point where the Ohio Supreme Court has just started tracking people who are in the military or, of veteran status amongst the legal field. And you're like, why would you not be tracking that before? Wouldn't you want to know?
Tracking that the whole time.
And so that's one of the kind of the crusades that I have is bring more awareness to veterans within the legal space, because I don't think we are thought of as much, and we are a diverse group of people, because we have a couple of the diversity factors, including disability. So bringing kind of all of those factors to the table, plus the veteran status. So I've had chats with folks about like, hey, why is that not something that we are also considering? Or, and whenever anybody asks for demographics, I always say, please make sure you also provide this to whoever has asked for demographics, because I think that's important. You never know who's looking at those and is like, yes. We want to know who the veterans are. We're rapidly growing population, and with the changes in our current, our current operations, more and more folks are going to get out. Folks are moving into the workforce, becoming veterans. So it makes sense to keep track of who's coming out and those folks with that unique background.
For sure. So, I mean, I totally sympathize with at least like and I think I probably said it, like, I feel like I have to be 20% better than the best man in the room all the time. Everybody's like just waiting for the failure or the trip up or the misstep or whatever, even if it's not real, it's just perceived. And that's just such a tough battle. So what do you do in terms of self-care, I guess I would say, to manage some of that and keep the bad out and let the good in?
Food and spiraling. No, I'm kidding.
Mostly food for me.
Yeah, it was just horrible. No, so this is something that I've really had to revamp, and still in the process of kind of figuring out what that looks like, because my children are transitioning into a different stage too, where I can leave them alone for 10 minutes and they'll play. Just
because you don't have to work because you can't hear them or see them doesn't mean they're like sticking their fingers in sockets, getting past them.
Yeah. Though if there is silence, I do get very, very suspicious. What are you guys doing? What's going on? Usually my son is climbing on something. And my daughter's just playing, and I'm like, did you not see? She's like,
you wanted to pull him off the bookshelf or no?
Yeah, she was like, yeah, I saw him. I'm like, savage, man. You are savage.
Wants to be an only child.
She said that more than once. But yeah, so I've started taking up cross stitch again. I have various levels of art projects. So art and music, being creative in general is something that I really, really enjoy. And I didn't really get to do it much throughout law school. And so my whole time in the Army and in law school, music was my focus. I play guitar. And so, I wrote a lot of songs. That was kind of the way that I channeled, especially deployed, channeled a lot of the emotion and just kind of general negativity to kind of get it out in a positive manner. I also worked out a lot when I was deployed. I don't work out anymore. So I feel very comfortable telling you.
Eat so much.
Yeah. I need to. My husband's like, you got a gym membership. I'm like, no.
Sure do. Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know we're paying for it. I see it every month. So trying to get back into that and channeling it into creativity. My daughter loves art too. And I feel like I'm she's at the age where my patience can handle whatever she's doing, because she doesn't want to be all over the place. She's focused on what she's doing, as opposed to my son, it like literally will throw paint at something and then try to like just, spear it all over the walls. At 3 years old, he's just like, done. So I enjoy doing little projects with my daughter. And so cross stitch, I've started doing that at night, just doing even just a couple of little, things, just to kind of get some of the energy out. Because I found that I will, retain some of that negativity, and I just need to get it out in some way.
Totally fair. So we'll wrap it up with this. I often ask people, like, what's the biggest piece of advice you could give people, like, going into the next phase of their career and letting some of the other stuff go and stepping into their new exciting role? What's the best piece of advice you could give them at this phase?
Don't be afraid if what you're going to doesn't look exactly like where you were before. It's okay to pivot and do something completely different if that's what you want to do. I think that I've been very, very consistent in doing what I want to do and saying, like, this is the path, this is where I'm going to go. And I feel like it has paid off for me. Some days I feel like it has not. I'm like, man, if I'd stayed in the Army, I'd be up for Lieutenant Colonel right now, maybe. I see my friends like pinning, and I'm like, man, I would, but I'd also probably be miserable because that was not my path. So don't be afraid if your path doesn't look like someone else's or look like the path that you thought it was going to be. Be happy and be okay with something that is completely different from expectation, because you never know what it's going to bring you to next, and always be open to that. Always be open to that randomness, because it's not actually random.
The universe always delivers.
Seriously.
All right. Well, Jasmin, thank you so much for joining us this week. I love that advice, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you here and as part of my team. And so I'm always super grateful for you.
Super happy to be here.
No problem. And so anyway, as always, thanks for listening today. And don't forget, don't just be bold, be bolder.